I value all my directors, except the liability in this room. He smiled when he said it. That's what I remember most. Not the words themselves, though they landed like stones in my chest. The smile, warm, confident, the smile of someone who knew exactly what he was doing and enjoyed it. The smile he'd given me 3 years ago when I handed him the solution that saved his career. 23 people laughed. I counted. Some covered their mouths. Some didn't. My colleagues, people I'd worked beside for years, people who'd asked me for advice, people who'd copied my strategies, laughed while my boss turned me into entertainment. The retreat center had these massive windows overlooking a lake. Beautiful place. The kind of location companies choose when they want you to feel valued, inspired, important. The afternoon sun hit the water just right, making everything sparkle. Picture-perfect moment for professional humiliation. I was the only woman director there. The only one. Do the math yourself. He didn't say my name. Didn't point. Didn't need to. Everyone knew. The laughter proved it. That special kind of knowing laughter that says, we're all in on the joke together, and the joke is you. My coffee had gone lukewarm in my hands. I'd been holding the same cup since his presentation started, back when I still thought this retreat might actually be about strategic planning instead of whatever public execution I'd just witnessed. But here's the thing nobody prepares you for. That moment when you realize you've been set up, not in some paranoid conspiracy way. Set up in the careful, deliberate way that powerful people arrange when they want you gone but need you to leave on your own. Because firing raises questions. Humiliating someone until they quit? That's just corporate culture. The morning session should have warned me. He'd been telling stories about leadership challenges, peppering in little comments that felt aimed. Some people work hard but lack strategic thinking. Activity isn't the same as productivity. We need to distinguish between those who execute vision and those who just execute. Each time, his eyes would drift my way. Just for a second, quick enough that you might miss it. But I didn't miss it, and neither did anyone else. By lunch, 3 other directors had given me this look. You know the one. Sympathy mixed with relief that it's you and not them. That look that says, I feel bad for you, but also thank God I'm not in your position. Nobody sat next to me, not deliberately avoiding me. That would be too obvious. Just naturally drifting toward other seats, choosing spots that happened to be elsewhere. The table filled up around me in this careful choreography of professional distance. I ate a salad I didn't taste, nodded when someone asked if the food was good, smiled because that's what you do. You smile. You pretend everything's fine. You absolutely do not let them see that you're dying inside. The afternoon session started with team-building exercises. No, seriously, team building. At an executive retreat, like we were summer camp counselors instead of people running a multi-million-dollar operation. He split us into groups. Random groups, he said. Totally random. Except somehow my group ended up being me and the 3 newest directors. The ones who barely knew the company. The ones who brought nothing to the strategic planning discussion we were supposedly having. That's when I started understanding. This wasn't about humiliation for humiliation's sake. This was strategic. He was isolating me professionally, making me irrelevant in front of everyone who mattered, creating a narrative where my departure wouldn't just make sense. It would feel inevitable. Before we continue, I need to pause for just a moment. If you're listening to this story because you've ever felt unseen at work, ever watched someone else take credit for your ideas, ever smiled through your own professional erasure, do me a favor, hit that like button, drop a comment telling me I'm not alone in this. Subscribe if you want to hear how this ends, because I promise you, it ends in a way nobody saw coming, especially not him. Okay, back to that retreat, and the moment everything changed. My name is Paloma, 36 years old, daughter of immigrants who cleaned office buildings so I could have opportunities they never got. First person in my family to finish college, first to get an MBA, first to reach director level at a major company. I don't tell you that for sympathy. I tell you because it matters to the story. Because when you grow up watching your parents scrub toilets in buildings where executives made more in a day than your family made in a month, you learn something crucial. The game is rigged, but it's not unwinnable. You just have to understand the rules nobody writes down. 3 years ago, I was a senior analyst, not director level, not even close. I worked in operations, which is corporate language for the place where we put people who do important work but don't get important recognition. The company was hemorrhaging money internationally. Our global partnerships division, which was supposed to be this huge growth opportunity, had become a disaster. We'd signed contracts in 7 countries, invested massive resources, and every single partnership was failing. Cultural misunderstandings, legal conflicts, communication breakdowns, the works. My boss back then, different boss, before the promotion, called me into his office one Tuesday. "You speak Spanish, right?" "Yes." "Perfect. I need you to look at our agreements in South America. Figure out why everything's falling apart." He didn't ask if I had time, didn't offer extra pay, just added it to my existing workload, like it was a minor task, instead of a complete audit of international operations across 3 countries. I said yes, because that's what you do when you're trying to prove yourself, when you're trying to show you're ready for more. I spent 2 weeks reviewing contracts. Then I spent another week talking to our partners overseas, using my own phone, on my own time, because the company wouldn't authorize international calls for someone at my level. What I found was worse than anyone realized. The contracts weren't just failing, they were fundamentally broken. Whoever had drafted them had copied American legal frameworks into countries with completely different commerce laws. We'd essentially asked our international partners to agree to terms that violated their own regulations. They'd signed anyway, desperate for the partnership, but implementation had become impossible. They couldn't fulfill contracts that contradicted their legal requirements. We couldn't modify terms without board approval. Everything had deadlocked. I could have written a report, documented the problems, passed it up the chain, let someone else fix it. Instead, I did something stupidly ambitious. I taught myself international commerce law. Not formally. I couldn't afford law school, but I bought textbooks, watched lectures online, spent 6 months studying at night after my kids went to sleep, learning how different countries structured business agreements. Then I learned Portuguese and Mandarin, basic conversational level, in both. Then I rewrote every single contract, 37 partnerships across 7 countries, restructured each one to align with local regulations while protecting company interests, added cultural consideration clauses, built in personal accountability measures. And here's the crucial part, the part that would matter 3 years later. I structured every agreement with me as the primary representative, not the company, me. This wasn't unusual in international commerce. Personal relationships matter enormously in global business. Partners wanted to know they had a specific person they could trust, someone accountable, someone who understood their local context. Having a named individual as the primary contact, with the company as the facilitating entity, was standard practice. Nobody questioned it. Why would they? I was a senior analyst. Nobody was paying attention to contract language written by someone that junior. I presented the restructured agreements to my boss. He looked them over for maybe 10 minutes, then forwarded them to his boss, who forwarded them up the chain, who eventually got them in front of Caspian. Caspian, chief operating officer back then, ambitious, charismatic, brilliant at making other people's ideas sound like his own insights. He called me into his office 3 days later. Huge office, 9th floor, windows overlooking the city, the kind of space that reminds you exactly where you stand in the hierarchy. "These contracts," he said, tapping my proposal. "This is exceptional work." My heart actually lifted. Stupid, naive hope. "I'd like your permission to present this to the board as a comprehensive restructuring strategy for our international division." "Of course," I said. "Should I prepare materials for the presentation?" "No need. I'll handle it. You've done enough. Really tremendous work." He presented it 2 weeks later. I heard about it secondhand. Someone from accounting mentioned that Caspian had given this amazing presentation about saving the international division. Visionary thinking. Strategic brilliance. My name never came up, but the strategy worked. God, did it work. Within 6 months, 28 of our 37 partnerships were operational again. Within a year, the international division went from massive liability to significant profit center. Revenue tripled, then tripled again. Caspian got promoted to CEO. His entire pitch was based on that turnaround. His strategic vision, his innovative approach. I got promoted to director, which sounds impressive until you realize I'd just saved the company's entire international operation and got bumped up 2 levels, while he got bumped up 7. But I told myself it was fine. I was director level now. I had influence, opportunity, a seat at bigger discussions. Except I didn't, not really, because here's what actually happened. Caspian absorbed my work so completely that it became his identity as a leader. Every board meeting, he'd talk about his international strategy. Every interview, he'd discuss his approach to global partnerships. Every leadership presentation referenced his vision for cultural bridge building. I became the person who implemented his strategy, who executed his vision, who made his ideas work. The international contacts, the 37 partnerships I'd personally restructured and rebuilt, they knew the truth. They worked with me directly, emailed me with questions, called me when problems arose, built relationships with me over 3 years of constant communication. But internally, I was Caspian's director, the person who handled international operations for him, who reported to him, who made his division successful. And I let it happen. Told myself that success at his level meant success for the whole team, that his visibility helped all of us, that good work would eventually be recognized. 3 years of that, 3 years of watching him collect awards for my strategies, 3 years of smiling when people congratulated him on innovations I'd created, 3 years of telling myself that loyalty and excellence would matter eventually. The retreat invitation came by email, mandatory attendance for all directors, 3 days at a location 2 hours outside the city, strategic planning session, team building, vision alignment. I almost didn't go. My daughter Rosita had a piano recital that weekend, first one where she'd be playing a solo. She'd been practicing for months. But you don't skip mandatory executive retreats. Not if you want to keep climbing. Not if you want to prove you're serious about leadership. I told Rosita I'd make the next one. Promised. She said she understood. 8 years old, and already learning to understand that work comes first. The retreat started Friday afternoon. Beautiful location, like I said, lake views, expensive accommodations, the kind of place designed to make you feel valued. Friday night was dinner and drinks, casual networking. I talked with other directors about their divisions, their challenges, their strategies. Normal professional conversation. Caspian was there, working the room, shaking hands, telling jokes. He'd gotten good at this. The casual charisma, the effortless authority. People gravitated toward him. He stopped by my conversation group briefly. Paloma, how's the international division? Strong. We just finalized 2 new partnerships in Eastern Europe. Revenue projections look excellent. Fantastic. You've really learned to execute the strategy well. Learn to execute. Like, it was his strategy. Like I was still learning. But I smiled. Thank you. Saturday morning started with his keynote. Leading with vision. Building strategy. That lasts. He talked about the importance of big picture thinking. About how true leaders see beyond immediate problems to systemic solutions. About how vision requires courage to restructure failing systems completely. Then he told the story of the international division. How it had been failing 3 years ago. How he'd recognized that the problem wasn't individual partnerships but fundamental structural issues. How he'd developed a comprehensive approach to rebuilding every agreement from the ground up. My story, my work, my 6 months of night study and contract restructuring, my relationships with 37 international partners, his vision. 23 people took notes. Several asked questions about his process. He answered with confidence, describing insights I'd written in proposals he'd never acknowledged came from me. I sat there, listened, took notes on my own work being presented as someone else's accomplishment. The morning session continued with breakout discussions. That's when the pointed comments started. Some people confuse activity with impact, he said while discussing operational efficiency. His eyes landed on me, just briefly. They're busy constantly, but lack strategic direction. My division had the highest revenue growth in the company, highest client satisfaction, lowest operational costs. But sure, lacking strategic direction. Lunch happened in this awful, knowing silence around me. People made space, chose other seats. The message was clear. Whatever was happening, they wanted distance from it. Afternoon session. Team building exercises. My group assignment with 3 new directors who barely knew anything. Then, the finale. I want to take a moment, Caspian said, standing at the front of the room, to recognize the incredible, director-level talent we have here. He went around the room, praised each director individually, specific accomplishments, genuine appreciation. When he got to me, he paused. And Paloma, who handles our international operations. That was it. No specific praise, no accomplishments mentioned, just acknowledgement that I existed and had a job. Then he smiled. That smile I mentioned at the beginning. I value all my directors, except the liability in this room. Laughter, immediate, genuine. 23 people laughing at a joke where I was the punchline. He didn't say my name. Didn't have to. Everyone knew. I stood up. My hands were steady. That surprised me. I'd expected shaking, fear, something physical, but I felt cold, clear, like everything had suddenly come into perfect focus. I walked to the front of the room, pulled a folder from my bag. I'd brought it with me, though I hadn't known why. Some instinct. Placed it on the presentation desk in front of him. For you, sir. Effective immediately. His smile shifted, became uncertain. What's this? My resignation and documentation you'll want to review privately. I walked out. Not fast, not running, just walking. Steady steps. Through the room, past 23 faces that had stopped laughing. Behind me, I heard him open the folder. In it, my resignation letter. Effective immediately. Professional. Brief. Also, printed copies of every email I'd sent to our 37 international partners over 3 years. Every relationship-building conversation. Every problem-solving exchange. Every personal connection I'd developed. Also, a letter I'd written by hand, in English, Spanish, and Mandarin, informing my international contacts that I was leaving the company and would be reaching out within the week to discuss continuing our partnership work through a new, independent arrangement. Also, page 17. Page 17 contained something nobody had ever bothered to check. The original contracts I'd restructured 3 years ago. The ones Caspian had presented as his vision. The ones that saved the international division. Every single one listed me, Paloma, senior analyst at the time, as the primary partnership representative, me personally, with the company as the facilitating entity. Standard international commerce practice, builds trust, creates personal accountability, completely legal, also completely binding. Those partnerships weren't with the company, they were with me. I'd structured it that way from the beginning, back when I was too junior for anyone to examine my contract language closely. Back when nobody thought a senior analyst could possibly be doing anything that mattered. The company had facilitated, provided resources, backed the agreements. But the relationships, the legal partnerships, those belonged to me. Without me, they had 37 contracts, with no primary representative, no personal contact, no relationship foundation, just paper. I made it to my car before I heard the screaming, actually screaming, not yelling, screaming. Caspian's voice, carrying across the parking lot, raw, panicked. I drove away. My phone started ringing before I reached the highway. Different board members, 4 of them, each calling separately. I let them go to voicemail, listened to the messages later. Paloma, this is Griffin from the board. We need to discuss what happened at the retreat. Please call me immediately. Paloma, Sable here. I just heard about your resignation. Let's talk about this. I'm sure we can work something out. This is Jorah. Paloma, whatever happened today, we can fix it. Name your terms. Paloma, Thorn, call me. Tonight. Whatever you want. We need you to reconsider. I called each of them back. Same message. You should speak with your CEO. He just told a room full of executives that I'm a liability. I'm simply agreeing with his professional assessment. Monday morning, I started making calls. International calls. To 37 partners across 7 countries. Same conversation, different languages. This is Paloma. I've left my previous position. I'm establishing an independent consulting practice focused on international partnership development. I'd like to discuss transitioning our current working relationship to this new structure. Are you interested? 37 calls, 37 yes responses. By Monday afternoon, 6 of our biggest partners had sent formal notices to the company. They would honor existing contracts through the end of the current quarter. After that, they'd be working with me directly. The board called an emergency meeting Monday night. Caspian was there. I know because Griffin called me afterward, told me what happened. He's claiming you stole company partnerships, Griffin said. Says you manipulated contracts illegally. The contracts are public record, I said. filed with international commerce authorities in 7 countries. Anyone could have reviewed them at any time over the past 3 years. They're completely legal. I'm simply exercising my rights as the primary partnership representative. He says you deceived the company, structured agreements to benefit yourself. I structured agreements to save failing partnerships using international commerce best practices. The fact that nobody bothered to read what I wrote isn't deception, it's incompetence. Silence on the line. What would it take for you to stay? Griffin finally asked. Nothing. I don't want to stay. Paloma, be reasonable. I am being reasonable. Your CEO called me a liability in front of 23 executives. He built his entire career on my work while erasing my contributions. He systematically humiliated me to force my resignation. I'm giving him exactly what he wanted. I'm gone. The international division. We'll be fine. You have 90 days to restructure your partnerships. That's plenty of time for someone with vision and strategic thinking. Isn't that what your CEO said he had? I hung up. Tuesday morning, the stock price dropped. Not catastrophically, but enough that people noticed. Enough that financial analysts started asking questions about the international division's stability. By Tuesday afternoon, 3 more partners had sent transition notices. Wednesday, the board announced organizational restructuring. Caspian was being moved to special projects, reporting directly to the board. Corporate language for, "You're done, but we can't fire you without severance negotiations and public questions. So we're putting you in a meaningless position until you're humiliated enough to quit." He'd done it to me. Now they were doing it to him. I didn't feel victorious. Didn't feel anything, much at all. I just felt tired. Thursday, I signed my first independent consulting contract. Partnership development services for a manufacturing company in Brazil. One of my original 37 contacts. They wanted help expanding into new markets. Friday, 2 more contracts. South Korea, Argentina. Within 2 weeks, I had consultation agreements with 11 of my former partners. Within a month, 26, I worked from home, set my own hours, made my own decisions, charged consulting rates that were triple my old salary. The company's international revenue dropped 82% in 1 quarter. Their stock followed. 3 board members resigned. Restructuring began. Caspian sent an email 6 weeks after the retreat. Subject line, "Can we talk?" Body, "Paloma, I think we need to have a conversation. There are things you don't understand about the position I was in. Pressures from the board, expectations I was trying to manage. We should discuss this directly." See, I read it 3 times. Then I archived it. Didn't delete, didn't respond, just archived. 2 months later, he resigned. Took a position at a smaller company. Lateral move that was really a step down. The press release called it "pursuing new opportunities." Corporate language for nobody else wanted him after his flagship division collapsed. I don't follow his career now. Don't think about him much. But sometimes I think about that retreat, that moment standing in front of 23 laughing colleagues. I think about how invisible I'd been, how thoroughly he'd erased my contributions, how easily everyone accepted the story he told about his own brilliance. And I think about page 17, the page nobody ever read, the contracts nobody examined, the details nobody thought mattered when they came from someone too junior to be doing anything important. Here's what I learned. Powerful people aren't actually untouchable. They just surround themselves with people who choose not to touch them, who accept their version of reality because questioning it feels dangerous. But power built on someone else's work isn't real power. It's performance. And performance ends the moment the actual talent stops participating. I didn't destroy Caspian's career. I stopped holding it up. Turns out, that was enough. My daughter Rosita had another piano recital last month. I was there, front row. She played beautifully. Afterward, she asked me about my work. "Do people know you're really good at your job now?" "The people who matter know," I said. "The people who pay you. The people I work with. The ones I help. Yes, they know." She thought about that. That's better than everyone knowing, right? Because they actually matter? "Yeah," I said. "That's better." I'm not going to tell you this story has a perfect happy ending. I still think about that retreat sometimes. Still feel that moment of 23 people laughing. Still carry the weight of 3 years spent being invisible while someone else collected awards for my work. But I also carry something else now. Something I didn't have before. Evidence that good work actually does speak for itself, just not always in the ways we expect. Not through recognition or promotions or appreciation from people who were never going to see your value anyway. Sometimes it speaks through the relationships you built. The people who actually know what you contributed. The partners who choose to follow you instead of staying with a company that never valued what you brought. I have 37 partnerships now. My partnerships. Built on my work, my relationships, my strategic thinking. Not one person can take credit for them, except me. That's worth more than any corporate title, more than any keynote presentation, more than watching someone else wear achievements like borrowed clothes. Last week, I got an email from one of the new directors who'd been at that retreat. The young guy who barely knew anything, who got assigned to my team during the humiliation exercises. "I need to tell you something," he wrote. "I've been thinking about that retreat for months, about what happened to you, about how everyone just went along with it. I didn't say anything that day. I should have. I'm sorry. But I want you to know, I'm leaving too, starting my own thing. You showed me it's possible to walk away from people who don't value your work. Thank you." I wrote back, "Don't thank me. Just remember this when you're successful. Remember who actually did the work. Remember to say their names. That's all. Maybe he will, maybe he won't. But I'll remember. I'll remember that I was called a liability by someone whose entire career was built on my labor. And I'll remember that I proved him right. I was a liability to his performance, to his stolen credibility, to his house of cards built from other people's achievements. The best revenge isn't destruction, it's clarity, making absolutely clear, with undeniable evidence, exactly who created what. I didn't have to destroy Caspian. I just had to stop being invisible. Turns out, visibility was the only weapon I ever needed. Thank you for listening to this story. If it resonated with you, if you've ever felt erased, overlooked, or undervalued at work, I need you to do something for me. Hit that like button. Tell me in the comments if you've experienced anything similar. Subscribe because I share these stories to remind us all that we're not alone in these experiences, and that there are ways through that don't require you to compromise who you are. Your support means everything.